Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the reports and the various issues around the fact that unions across America or parts of America may well be considering a general strike in the event of Joe Biden winning the presidential election, but the current incumbent President Tiny Hands refusing to work towards a peaceful transition of power. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Halloween, a day when we recount horror stories, both real and imagined, although there's enough real ones going on right now, we don't really need the fake ones. And the United States currently has, it has to be said, basically a barely walking jack-o'-lantern as president. So, seems like a good time to discuss a potentially seismic event in American history. In a few days, it will be the date of the US presidential election. Now, obviously, in reality, many Americans have already voted. In fact, there have been reports that there's been record numbers, or for some generations anyway, record numbers of people turning out to vote. But November the 3rd is the official date, which means in reality, the date we're all waiting for is November the 4th, which I think is next Wednesday, when the results may indicate a winner. We'd normally expect the results then to indicate a winner one way or the other. Not sure how the impact of potential votes still to be counted later, postal ballots, that sort of thing will impact that. But the general feeling is that November the 4th could reveal a Joe Biden victory. Polls would certainly suggest that very strongly, but I'm taking nothing for granted. I've wanted to ignore the polls completely. Now, in this event, of course, the orange one has suggested that he may simply cry foul and declare the results null and void due to polling fraud. Tricky. Tricky in any country at any time, but in one where gun deaths per capita are way beyond any other even remotely advanced nation, extremely tricky. Now, to this end, I'm sure the authorities have already, pardon the expression, but I'm sure they've already been wargaming the situation in order to work out amongst various scenarios what their response would be in advance. You don't want to be waiting until something goes wrong to decide what to do. But ordinary workers in America, it seems, look like they might be interested in playing their part should it be necessary as well. So some unions have proposed the idea that there doesn't seem to be, as far as I could tell from the reports, but the reports are on this side of the Atlantic, there doesn't seem to be the concept of relishing this, but the idea that as a last resort, a general strike, if Trump tries to cling on to power despite a Joe Biden win. Not a stand against Trump, of course. I mean, many members of these unions will presumably be Trump supporters even now and will be voting for Trump. It's specifically an intended stand against an attempt to deny the democratic will of the American people. Now, according to the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, for example, Sarah Nelson, she was sort of saying, well, a simple protest won't really impact Trump. You just stand there silently protesting. He doesn't care. What's needed, she says, is to take power and control from the government. And the only way they can do that is by withholding labour. And absolutely, but the only problem with these lines of thinking, I always think, is very often people, I think these days, don't really recognise their own power in union. Because, you know, historically, you looked at the birth of unions, the growth of unions, and it was very much about struggle of the workers. It was a real struggle. Now it's a subscription that you pay for some other people to try and negotiate with the government and business owners, maybe on a more regional level with your own boss, to cut you a better deal or to help you in a difficult situation. You know, some do it better than others. Some unions also seem to care more about advancing their workers' rights than others. But I don't know how much modern union members really see themselves as being actively involved in their union, here or in America. You know, and if push came to shove, would they really stand up and be counted in large enough numbers to have a real impact nationally? you know, and because it wouldn't be across the country, of course, would it? That would be too much to hope for. Couldn't possibly. But I suppose large participation in a general strike in a number of states could potentially have some impact. It could send a very powerful message. We saw, for example, how the Black Lives Matter protests spread this summer. We've seen how a sustained protest against authoritarian brutality is possible in Belarus. You know, will we, I think, see something spectacular in America next week? I mean, we'd all like to think we don't need that scenario to play out. And you know, I run in my head, would it ultimately be needed? Because it is a last, you know, none of these union leaders are suggesting that they would go straight for that. Or if Biden wins and Trump says anything that suggests he's pouring scorn on it, we're going to come straight out with a general strike. They're talking about this very much being a last resort. And you know, to be needed, a number of things have to happen. There's quite a lot of ifs in this scenario. The first thing that needs to happen, of course, is that Biden would need to emerge next week as the winner. Again, I know what polls are saying. We'll just wait and see, shall we? But that needs to be the first one. Now, you could argue out of this whole string of events that is the most likely to occur. Okay. The second one then is, Trump has suggested that in that scenario he will declare the result null and void. He'll cry foul, he'll cry fraud, and he will attempt to cling on to power. Whether just because he enjoys that power or because he doesn't fancy being arrested by Robert Mueller, I don't know. Or maybe some other option. But he has suggested he would seek to cling on to power. Will he, though? It's all right boasting about that. I'm quite sure that people will have whispered in his ear that he will not be supported in this and that he's just going to make it worse for himself if he does this. So it's not a given that he will do that. But again, there is widespread belief that he may do that. So that's the next if. So then let's say Biden emerges as the winner. Trump ignores these little whispers in his ear, or listens to the wrong whispers inside his own head, and he says, right, now I'm still president, Biden didn't win, you're being lied to, fake news, all the rest of it. So then what about senior Republicans, the FBI, the military, all sworn to defend the Constitution? We would have to assume that they all take a back seat on this and hope someone else clears up the mess. It's not a pleasant situation to have to deal with, it has to be said, a rogue president. And I'm quite sure a lot of them would be relieved if some other agency dealt with it for them. But we'd have to be expecting all of those agencies to stand back, hope someone else clears up the mess so they don't get their own hands dirty. Some may do that. All of them, it just seems doubtful to me. And all of that has to happen before workers would even be asked whether or not they were actually serious about this potential for a general strike. But then in the report on this that I was reading, I did see mention of a wider protest. So let's say Biden wins. Trump does declare himself king, gets himself a nice little crown. Republicans stay quiet. Okay, that may happen. I'd still like to think not, but it may happen. Or worse, get on board. The FBI and the military also get cold feet and don't really fancy dragging the president out of the White House by his ankles. Please do that. Please do that. But let's say they don't. And of course, they don't need to do it straight away. They just have to make sure that the transition of power can take place so that Biden is inaugurated in January. So the authorities abandon their sworn duty, which, as I say, I can't see as being likely, but what do I know? Then the American people will be that last line of defence. They will be then asked to defend their democracy. So, you know, let's say some unions do vote in favour of a general strike. And it's a significant number in a number of states. Then you could also have other organised protest groups becoming involved themselves. So the aforementioned Black Lives Matter protest groups, for example, the infrastructure's already there. You know, they're well practiced after summer. They're already set up for this. There's environmental groups, women's rights groups were mentioned. I suppose you could just have good old-fashioned groups against having a jack-o'-lantern in the Oval Office. But then, of course, would come the counter-protests, the armed nutters who see themselves as Trump's volunteer army. And I wonder if somehow maybe some of that thinking would work against those taking part in the general strike. What, for example, intimidation may be used by the armed militia amongst Trump's supporters could get very messy. All in all, it's very likely to be best if the actual authorities take care of it, which I still expect they to be. But it is interesting the notion that unions would actually maybe take action and coordinate action to defend democracy. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I will see you later.